Louie, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. In fact, I'm thinking back right now to the time we spent together at T. Boone Pickens's ranch, where if I remember, I was kind of going through my travails with the Obama administration, and you were kind of advising me for how to approach all that psychologically.
Well, you were and are an amazing person, and you went through that harassment, that a very unfair Department of Justice and prosecution, but you had so much class, you still got it, and it just caused me to think all the more of you, and I appreciate you're continuing to stand up for America. You haven't been intimidated. You're still out there exposing the lies and bringing out truth. And I love that about you, Dinesh. But that was also a time of a lot of prayer for you, too. God's been good.
Absolutely. And those prayers certainly came to fruition. I've gotten my pardon. I've gotten all my rights back. It's really awesome. So thank you for that very much. Let's turn to the Biden administration, because there's so many disasters on so many different fronts, Louie. But if you had to say, what is the single biggest crisis we face today with these Biden guys? Is it China? Is it the border? Is it inflation? When you look across the landscape, what worries you the most and why?
Well, he is taking us into an area of totalitarian, Orwellian type leadership, and that is just top down, taking away our rights. That concerns me more than anything. We've made mistakes in foreign policy. Of course, it's hard to find one that's worse than how he ended Afghanistan. We needed to be out, but not like that, and not to empower the people that took down our towers and want to hit us again, not to empower Russia the way he has. All of this was so predictable with the problems with Russia and China when he empowered them so much. And then, of course, the southern border. You cannot keep a republic, as you know, Dinesh, when you've got 2 million people plus pouring in every year, and they don't know what it takes to keep a republic. So it's the overall of this administration, but especially when you're taking away Americans' rights. And that just makes it nearly impossible to come back from what he is doing to us. That's also concerning.
I mean, Louie, I think you're making an important distinction here, and that is that if I think back when I first came to America, it was the Carter administration, and they were making one disastrous decision after another. Remember, there was the hostage crisis, so there was the foreign policy disaster, there was runaway inflation, so some of the same signatures we're seeing today. But I think what you're saying is that an important difference is that Carter wouldn't dream of militarizing the FBI against his opponents. He wouldn't dream of classifying his domestic critics as somehow domestic terrorists or enemies of the state. We've seen an escalation of that type of rhetoric. Why do you think the Democrats have made this fateful turn in which they have now, in a sense, are trying to establish, it seems, a one-party state and portray their political opponents as somehow enemies of democracy?
Well, I've been quoted accurately, which is very rare, when I said that the only thing Orwell got wrong was the year. It wasn't 1984. And here it's all happening. But I think I have to point out, as a Christian, we were a Christian nation, and that doesn't mean that everybody was a Christian. It means that most all of the country believed in the morals of the Bible. And that has been under attack. Jimmy Carter would never, ever have thought it might be okay to shut churches down, leave marijuana and liquor stores open, but shut down the churches. Throughout our history, when we had problems, we counted on the churches to people to pour in and pray and ask for God's blessing and help in the time of crisis. this is the first one where we've ever said, let's shut down the churches and not let anybody in. And in fact, some places arrest people for trying to go to church, even just sitting in their cars listening. So that's a huge, huge change. And I think it doesn't bode well. I really believe that this republic will not last much longer with this type of mentality. And when I've been saying that, I did not even know the full extent to which the DOJ and the FBI were weaponized, as you said, Dinesh. They've been weaponized in ways that make it's going to be very, very difficult to ever get back to a responsible DOJ. They just infused so many people that would use it as a weapon. Just such a dangerous time.
You have been one of the very few Republicans who have openly advocated for some of these nonviolent defendants on January 6th. What explains the odd reluctance of the party more generally, and I'm talking about the mainstream of the leadership, to recognize that while there were bad guys in that pile, and some of them, have to be held accountable, there were also a lot of good guys who, even if they were wrong, came to D.C. to say, wait a minute, we don't believe that these election concerns we have are being adjudicated anywhere. So this was kind of a primal scream at their own representatives, hey, pay attention. And for them to be in solitary confinement for months, their trials delayed, in some cases more than a year. I mean, this is such atrocious behavior. Why would the GOP leave so many of its own troops on the field, which obviously is going to send a demoralizing message throughout the rank and file?
Well, some of the Republicans have said, oh, they're horrible, they deserve what they got. And that plays really well with the lamestream media. So perhaps that's what they're looking for, some pats on the back from people that hate people like us. I think also intimidation is part of it. This DOJ has intentionally gone out of its way to be fascist in the way it's arrested people, the way they have prosecuted people, and gotten the media to demonize people. Some who did wrong intentionally and deserve to be punished, but some who, when they saw Capitol Police step out of the way and people waving them in, they went, oh, well, I guess we could go in. And there's so much dishonesty, though, Dinesh, in our top FBI, including, I believe, the director, I believe Merrick Garland. I believe he was lying when I said, basically, was there a gun found on anybody that illegally entered the Capitol? Now, I know he knows good and well. That's one of the first things people investigating want to know. And he knows there was no gun in the Capitol, that the only gun they found was in a car a long way away from the Capitol. He has to know that. And yet what he said was deceptive, dishonest, demeaning, when he said, well, I remember they found a gun, but I'm not really sure where. Dinesh, we cannot have justice in America when the head of the DOJ and the head of the FBI think it's okay to lie a little bit to achieve their purposes. They have got to be straight arrows, or we will not survive this kind of weaponization. And not only DOJ and FBI, but also our intel community. Clapper, Brennan, they lied. They should have been prosecuted for their lies like Republicans would be if they had lied like they did. But nothing, just silence. And I think that's one of the things that scares me for our future. When people that are dishonest are in charge, that many people in those powerful positions, that's really different to have that many. And now the latest revelations from Durham, I'm still upset with Durham that he hadn't brought these out more quickly. because his failure to bring them out more quickly has affected an election. It did.
Fact that the Democrats have systematically weaponized these agencies and sort of corrupted them at the top and perhaps even at the middle. And you were saying, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say that the Republicans take the House and the Senate, and maybe even the presidency in 24. Do we merely go about trying to kind of clean up and fumigate these agencies? Or do you think we should take the additional step of giving the Democrats a taste of their own medicine? And I say that because think about how you would deal with a classroom bully. I mean, you wouldn't say, okay, listen, I'm going to try to make sure that he stops the bullying. You have to make sure that he gets a lesson that he's not going to forget. And then he's going to go, bullying isn't working for me anymore because these guys are actually stronger than me and they can bully me if they get the power. So isn't it a fact that that's the only way that we can get through to these guys, that they've got to stop this kind of nonsense?
Well, you are right. And it's not a matter of payback. It's a matter of enforcing the law. And you're talking to a guy, you know the rules of the House got changed under Pelosi. The chief of Capitol Police said there's no evidence from any source that any member of Congress is a threat to another member. And yet she put up metal detectors exclusively for the members of Congress, just to jerk us around and to make it look like, oh, this is such a terrorist situation. These Republicans are terrorists. And then making us wear masks that have been very ineffective. And now the science is starting to come out. And possibly Fauci was right in one of the flip-flops he's done along the way. But one of the rules I wanted to see was instead of us just going along as we've done so many times, okay, we're going to change the rules back and be reasonable. I wanted to have a rule that said anybody that voted for these Democratic rules that included metal detectors and masks, you have to continue to follow those rules you voted for, and everybody else gets to follow the new rules where we get rid of this stuff. And it's along the lines you're talking about. People need to know that there is going to be a price. And when it comes to justice, these people that have weaponized and abused our system, our justice system, they've got to be held accountable. And I'm sure you're so well plugged in. I mean, a guy that absolutely intentionally lied, defrauded the FISA court. He was allowed to leave and get a better paying job. And so there were no real consequences. And yes, he had charges, but, wrist slap type stuff. There's no message to the rest of the people in the DOJ. You're looking at time in real prison for violating the criminal law and violating the trust in you. People have got to go to jail for what they've done. And going back to the party, Dinesh, there are people that are afraid that if they say too much, the DOJ will come after them. And that's exactly the way a weaponized federal government ends up getting total control, is when they have made the people subservient, made them fear. But the old slogan when in New Hampshire, live free or die. People are, oh my gosh, I would rather give up my freedom than be afraid of my government. I'm just going to, and then they feed that fear by saying, look, if you haven't done anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about us going through all your emails and listening to your phone calls. You got nothing to worry about. You're innocent. That's exactly how you lose their freedom. And so many people are buying into that, and they've got to stand up. And that's exactly why they're going after the January 6th, to send the message, if you stand up, you can go to jail.
Now, I was happy to see on a small note that Kevin McCarthy did say that, look, if the Democrats are going to throw Republicans off committees and exercise that kind of jurisdiction on the opposition party, then if we get in, we're going to do the same thing to you. We're going to throw Ilhan Omar off for committees and maybe AOC. And that's kind of what I'm talking about is exercising a kind of deterrence. Now, let's turn to the Supreme Court, because as you know, the Trump nominees, I'm thinking here specifically of Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, were subjected to the Democratic kind of ringer, right? I mean, accusations, attacks. And now I see Mazie Hirono and others saying, oh, let's just take a deep breath and have a very civil, reasonable Senate confirmation process. And once again, I come back to the same point. Isn't it true that the way to rehabilitate and domesticate the process is to give them a taste of their own medicine?
I couldn't agree more, except we won't lie like they will. We won't create false narratives the way they do, totally fictional narratives that they have no problem making allegations and assassinating people's characters. So we just need to use the truth to go after these people. But so many Republican senators will not even use things that they have said and done that are so offensive to our way of life and to keeping a republic. They need to brutalize them over the things they've actually said and done. But too many Republicans say, well, they got a pass from, the Bar Association, so we're going to go ahead and let them go. No, some of them have such destructive beliefs to a republic. They need to be exposed for who they are. And Kevin is making clear things are going to be different. We have got to give them a taste of the brutality they did on us, and just in fairness. But the Senate continues to think they can play nice and it'll get better. And one other thing on the Supreme Court, and you mentioned Kavanaugh, one of the reasons they go after people like that, accuse Kavanaugh of being a rapist, all this kind of thing, is to try to turn people against them so that Republicans will get scared and not vote them onto the court. That's obvious. But another reason is, I believe, intimidation. And, they are bound to have gone through some post-traumatic stress. I mean, you don't get nominated for the Supreme Court unless you have lived a pretty clean life. So you have people like Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, they've lived their lives being ethical and moral. Every turn as a judge, people have respect. And all of a sudden, Kavanaugh's called a rapist and all this kind of stuff. Their families were traumatized. And I believe that, and one of my concerns was that the Democrats may have traumatized them to the point that they're reluctant to step out and take a bold stand for America because of what their families will go through again if they do. Intimidation often works, and I'm hoping they're going to overcome their fear of another post-traumatic stress episode. But you can't live in fear and let the bad guys intimidate you.
You know who proves that, Louie, is Clarence Thomas, because he got the same treatment, but I think he realized, listen, I'm not going to forget what you guys did to me, and I don't think he ever has. Louie Gohmert, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Dinesh, great to be with you.